You're listening to The Philosopher's Note on Man's Search for Meaning. More wisdom in less time.
Hi, this is Brian welcoming you to The Philosopher's Notes on Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. We'll start with a quote from Viktor Frankl. He says, "Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible." Viktor Frankl, he's unquestionably one of my heroes, and this book is a must-read, or must-reread, as the case may be. If you don't have it yet, it's time to Amazon it. It's impossible to be a serious student of life and not soak up as much Frankl as you can. The man survived the horrors of Nazi concentration camps and, from that pain, brought the world his logotherapy, a philosophy based on the fundamental precept that we have ultimate responsibility for choosing our responses to any given situation. And we have an equally powerful responsibility to determine how we will give ourselves to the world and to create a truly meaningful life. We're going to touch on a handful of my favorite big ideas here, and I trust you will be inspired by and admire the beautiful man as much as I am and do. Let's start with our attitude. Quote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one last thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." This message is the cornerstone of Frankl's philosophy, and of course, is echoed among the great teachers. From Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, he says, "Your mind will be like its habitual thoughts, for the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Soak it then in such trains of thoughts as, for example, where life is possible at all, a right life is possible. And, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your own estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." To another Stoic philosopher, and a former Roman slave, Epictetus, he says this in his Enchiridion: "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." And to Jesus, he says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." How about Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching? Hold on to the center and make up your mind to rejoice in this paradise called life. And the Buddha, he says, "Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think." Martin Luther King Jr. says, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and discovery." And I'm going to continue with Dan Millman in The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. He says, "Pain is a relatively objective, physical phenomenon. Suffering is our psychological resistance to what happens. Events may create physical pain, but they do not in themselves create suffering. Resistance creates suffering. Stress happens when your mind resists what is. The only problem in your life is your mind's resistance to life as it unfolds." How about Carlos Castaneda? He says, "The basic difference between an ordinary man and a warrior is that a warrior takes everything as a challenge, while an ordinary man takes everything as a blessing or a curse." And he says, "The trick is in what one emphasizes. We either make ourselves miserable or we make ourselves strong. The amount of work is the same." All right, just one more, and thank you for amusing me. We'll wrap up with Norman Vincent Peale, Mr. Power of Positive Thinking. He says, "Become a possibilitarian. No matter how dark things seem to be or actually are, raise your sights and see possibilities. Always see them, for they're always there." And we can go on and on, yes, I did go on for quite a while there, about the power of choosing our response to a situation. Frankl is probably the poster child for this admonition that we must recognize the fact that we have a responsibility to choose how we respond to any given situation. Frankl, a man who lost his entire family and barely survived the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps of World War II, came up with this philosophy in the midst of the most brutal experience any human being will ever go through. We've all experienced many things we wish never happened, But the fact is, only very few among us have ever experienced anything as ghastly as losing our entire family and nearly losing our own lives in the horrors of a concentration camp. And if this man can choose his attitude in his situation, we can certainly choose our responses. So, what's bothering you right now? You get a parking ticket, lose your job, relationship not working, kids being a challenge, are you sick? Of course, any and all of the challenges we face in our day-to-day lives can bring us turmoil. But never forget that ultimately, how we choose to respond to the challenge is entirely our call. So do not be a victim to the myriad of petty things that we can choose to let bother us. Own your attitude. Choose how you will respond to any given situation. My personal recommendation, flip it around and think about all the things for which you're grateful. Get a parking ticket? Be grateful you even have a car. Be grateful that you're going to have the opportunity to help pay for someone's wages for part of the day. You stub your toe? Be grateful you have a toe to stub and such a great life that that's probably the worst thing that's going to happen to you today. Kids being a little challenging? Be grateful they're healthy enough to make so much noise and honor them for the growth you both experience together. Whatever it is, choose your optimal response, starting now. All right, the next big idea is your potential is waiting. Frankl says, what man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for some goal worthy of him. What he needs is not the discharge of tension at any cost, but the call of a potential meaning waiting to be fulfilled by him. Wow. Too often we want to live in the tensionless state we can find watching television, or, for some of us spiritual aspirants, even in the state of meditation, transcending the throes of our daily challenges in some yogic bliss. But that's not the point of life. The point? To find a goal worthy of us and to spend our lives striving and struggling to fulfill the potentiality within us. It reminds me of Robert Fritz's brilliant book, The Path of Least Resistance. He says that the big problem is that we have this conflict between our desire to have something and this equally powerful belief we can't have it, aren't worthy of it, etc. We bounce back and forth between these two poles, desperately trying to relieve the tension and not realizing that the only way to do that is to follow Frankl's advice and create a goal worthy of us, a goal that gets us out of bed in the morning and keeps us away from the sedatives we choke ourselves with, from the pills to the TV and the other things we use to discharge that tension. But here's a news flash, the pain is not going away, not until we commit to our highest self, to a goal worthy of our potential. So how about you? What's your goal? You still refining it? Here's the shortcut. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Combine that with, if you were absolutely guaranteed to succeed, what would you do? Go ahead and answer those. Maybe press pause while you think about it. I'll wait. All right. Did you do it? Good. So there's your worthy goal. Now get to work. Oh, and the first time you hit a roadblock, you're going to want to go back to your old ways of discharging tension. Avoid that. Those old habits aren't going to get you very far. Hold the tension, witness it, and simply take the next baby step toward your worthy goal. And that brings us to the next big idea, logotherapy. Quote, ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. And Frankl's logotherapy, which is the philosophy he developed, considers, this is a quote, considers man as a being whose main concern consists in fulfilling a meaning and in actualizing values, rather than in the mere gratification and satisfaction of drives and instincts. Powerful stuff. And how about you? Are you gazing at your navel, wondering what the meaning of life is? Well, Frankl would suggest get up, look at your world, look at your gifts, ask yourself, how can I serve? How can I give my highest self, my greatest strengths, in the greatest service to the world? My hunch is you'll have an idea or two. It might be something as simple as, I can volunteer in the soup kitchen this weekend. Okay, perfect. Google the soup kitchen, call them up, book yourself as a volunteer for this weekend, right now. If you have other instincts, Follow them. As Byron Katie says in her brilliant book, Loving What Is, she says, "What I call doing the dishes is the practice of loving the task in front of you. Your inner voice guides you all day long to do simple things such as brush your teeth, drive to work, call your friend, or do the dishes. Even though it's just another story, it's a very short story, and when you follow the direction of the voice, the story ends. We are really alive when we live as simply as that, open, waiting, trusting, and loving to do what appears in front of us now. What we need to do unfolds before us, always. Doing the dishes, paying the bills, picking up the children's socks, brushing our teeth. We never receive more than we can handle, and there is always just one thing to do. Whether you have $10 or $10 million, life never gets more difficult than that." That's powerful stuff. Did you have a bigger answer to your question of how you can serve? Maybe start that conscious business you've been talking about, or going back to school to become a teacher, or finally signing up for the Peace Corps, or maybe being a big brother or big sister. Awesome. Whatever it is, pay attention to what your intuition is telling you is the next step. Don't get bogged down with all the details of how it's going to come together. Just do the dishes and watch the momentum build. All right, and the next big idea I call let it ensue. This is probably in the top 10 favorite thoughts I've ever read. It's from the introduction to Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl says, "Again and again, I therefore admonish my students in Europe and America. Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen, and the same holds for success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. I want you to listen to what your conscience commands you to do, and go on to carry it out to the best of your knowledge. Then you will live to see that in the long run, I say, success will follow you precisely because you had forgotten to think about it." Wow. Couple of things here. First, it's so easy to spend all of our time asking what we can get out of a situation instead of what we can give. I don't know about you, but I feel stressed when I'm just focused on myself. The moment I get out of my own little set of fears and issues and start thinking about how I can serve and give to those around me, my stress seems to evaporate. It's amazing. Try it out. The next time you're stressed, step back. See how you're focused on yourself and how you may not be able to get what you wanted. Flip the situation around and see how you can give all of yourself to the situation. The irony here, of course, is that when you truly give yourself to the world, you'll get more than you ever dreamt of in return. The second thing is stop trying to be successful. Stop putting all of your attention on the prize. As the vegan hip-hop mogul yogi Russell Simmons tells us in his brilliant book, Do You, he says, "I know some people say, keep your eyes on the prize, but I disagree. When your eyes are stuck on the prize, you're going to keep stumbling and crashing into things. If you really want to get ahead, you've got to keep your eyes focused on the path." Couldn't agree more. Take your eyes off the prize. Put it on your next step. As Frankl says, for success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. And that leads us to the next big idea, which is missions. Frankl says, everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life. Therein he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated. Thus, everyone's task is as unique as is his specific opportunity to implement it. So what are you here to do? What's your specific vocation or mission in life? Are you clear? Write it down and live it. If you're stuck, write down the question, what is my specific mission in life? Then simply write down, my specific mission in life is to, and let it flow. Don't censor yourself or need it to be right, just write. The process of discovering who we are and what our greatest gifts are, and how we give those to the world is, at least in my experience, an arduous one. We don't just snap our fingers and say, aha, that's it. At least I didn't. I've had many amazing ideas and breakthroughs and distinctions, but they come in the midst of pretty much constantly living in the question of what my mission in life is, and having the courage to start taking the baby step, or the big steps, I feel intuitively called to make. So please, 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 spend some time today asking yourself the question of what you're here to do in this beautiful world of ours. Let's live the question and the answer. And remember the next big idea, the why. Frankl says, a man who becomes conscious of the responsibility he bears toward a human being who affectionately waits for him, or to an unfinished work, will never be able to throw away his life. He knows the why for his existence and will be able to bear almost any how. So what's your why? What unfinished work inspires you? Who waits for your gifts to be delivered? What do you know you're here to do? What do you dare to dream when you really open up to the possibilities of life? What is your why? Find it, and you'll magically endure the burning, which is our next big idea, where Frankl says, what is to give light must endure burning. How beautiful is that? It reminds me of Rumi's poem. He says, brother, stand the pain. Escape the poison of your impulses. The sky will bow to your beauty if you do. Learn to light the candle. Rise with the sun. Turn away from the cave of your sleeping. That way a thorn expands to a rose. A particular glows with the universal. And of course, when we're talking about enduring burning, we have to talk about George Bernard Shaw's infinitely genius rant. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish clod of ailments and grievances complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community. And as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is sort of a splendid torch, which I have a hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it over to future generations. Amen. So you want to give light? I certainly hope the answer to that question is an unequivocal yes. Then you must endure the burning. You must endure the challenges of discovering who you are and how you're going to fit into this world, let alone really live in this world. How you're going to trek out into the forest of your own hero's journey again and again and again, each time facing your demons and coming back to the world with your gifts, again and again and again. It's not going to be easy, but who wants that anyway? Remember, we're no longer looking for a way to discharge our tension at any cost. We're looking for a goal worthy of us, a goal that sets us on fire and lights our splendid torches. I raise my torch to you and toast to our burning as we conclude this quick look at Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And we'll wrap it up with a quick look at Viktor Frankl's bio, some notes I think you'll also enjoy, and some quotes from the sidebar of the PDF. So Viktor Emil Frankl, MD and PhD, was born on March 26, 1905, and died on September 2, 1997. He was an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist, as well as a Holocaust survivor. Frankl was the founder of logotherapy and existential analysis, the third Viennese school of psychotherapy. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, first published in 1946, chronicles his experiences as a concentration camp inmate and describes his psychotherapeutic method of finding meaning in all forms of existence, even the most sordid ones, and thus a reason to continue living. He was one of the key figures in existential therapy. That was adapted from wikipedia.com, where you can learn more about Frankl, and of course, anything under the sun. And if you liked this note, I think that you'll also really enjoy notes on Rumi, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and the 7 spiritual laws of success, as well as authentic happiness, do you, and learned optimism. Cool. With that, we'll jump into some of the quotes on the sidebars. We'll start with one by Frankl. He says, "It did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. We needed to stop asking about the meaning of life and instead to think of ourselves as those who are being questioned by life daily and hourly. Our answer must consist not in talk and meditation, but in right action and in right conduct. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. And Fritz Perls says, I don't want to be saved, I want to be spent. Viktor Frankl says, the meaning of our existence is not invented by ourselves, but rather detected. And how about the Chinese proverb, be not afraid of going slowly, but only afraid of standing still. And finally, the Buddha offers, your work is to discover your work, and then, with all your heart, to give yourself to it. All right, well, thank you for joining me with this philosopher's notes, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
We hope you enjoyed this Philosopher's Note. Please go to www.philosophersnotes.com to download more.